All right, thanks very much, Nikki. Well, hello, everybody, and thank you for being with us today. So I'm Michelle Radley. I'm a college access counselor at the Finance Authority of Maine. And with me today, I have the lovely Nikki Vachon, being my wing woman. So she will be there to answer questions that are dropped into the chat throughout today, as well as provide some helpful links as we move through the presentation. So if you have anything or any needs as we go along, feel free to toss that in the chat. And again, she'll be keeping an eye on that. So today we're going to be talking a little bit about comparing aid offers because believe it or not, it is already that time of year and we are here. So about halfway through February now, of course, it being the short month. So I guess we'll get this rolling. I love to start, just generally talking about and reminding everybody about the financial aid process. And this is a really great place, to kick everything off, seeing as the timeline has been so wonky over the past couple of years. So just having a reminder about what we've already done and where we're moving forward. Typically we have people start creating those FSA IDs. So obviously we're starting to talk about those studentaid.gov accounts. And then moving into, completing the FAFSA and applying for college. So those are the pieces that, at this point, we're hoping that students have already completed. If not, obviously not too late to start doing that. But obviously something we want people to have done. Additionally, if there are any other sort of forms that need to be completed, like maybe like the CSS profile, that's also important to do at that point in time. And now after these pieces have been completed, typically 1 to 3 days after the FAFSA has been all filed and processed, the FAFSA data gets sent over to colleges. And that's where we're kind of sitting now with some schools. So we're starting to see some aid offers roll in. And they're using that FAFSA data to then compile those aid offers. And one important piece about that is the student has to be accepted before they will receive one of these offers of aid. So sometimes you might have some students receiving them, some students not, but make sure that they're accepted before they will be getting that offer for aid. So today's webinar, we're going to be talking about specifically the comparing financial aid offers part of the process. So again, that's after typically when they've received all these different offers, they want to sit down and compare them one-on-one to see really what they're being offered and what is the most manageable and makes the most financial sense for themselves and their families. So when we're talking about financial aid offers today, we're going to primarily be focusing on net price. I'll talk a little bit about that in the next slide, but we're really looking at that individual cost for each individual student, not the sticker price, not, that larger cost of attendance. This again can have a pretty big influence in the way that somebody goes to decide where they're going to be going to college, because one school that might on the surface look really expensive for one individual might actually be the most affordable option for someone else. So again, it's really important that we break out those pieces and have a thorough discussion in terms of ways that the student can understand the difference between things like net price and sticker price. At that point, after we get through today's offer, if somebody had sat down and compared all their different offers for aid, that's the point in which the student, if necessary, would accept aid by the school. So make sure the student has set up their things like their school email, their school portal, if any sort of additional documentation is needed, or if, again, they do need to accept aid. At that point, the school then processes the accepted aid. So for federal monies, that might mean that they're pulling down that money from the federal government. For any sort of institutional money, they'll pull that money as well. Another point in which the school might email, call, ask for any sort of documentation that's missing. So again, it's just a really good practice to help remind those students to get into the habit of checking some of these emails and portals, because this is probably a little bit of a newer process for them and maybe like a newer change that they're going to be having, stepping into that full-on adulthood role. And after that point, the processed aid will appear as pending on the bill. So the student will have an idea, of finally what it's going to look like, end all be all. That's how much it's going to cost for that semester. And then this process goes all over again in the fall? I feel like that's a pretty common question I actually get from families is, do we have to do this all over again? And yes, you do. So I like to remind people right off the top, back at the very beginning when you're making your studentaid.gov account, this is something you're gonna have to do every year. Hold on to that information, hold on to your documentation. And, especially when you're looking at those aid offers, it's important to remember that this is something that happens every year because that can influence some decision making too. All right, so I know I talked a little bit about net price, but just to kind of reiterate that point, that's really what we're focusing on today, and generally what we at FAME like to encourage people to look at most specifically when they're exploring school options. And then obviously this can factor into earlier in terms of the school search itself. But you're getting a really good look at net price at this point in the process when you're starting to compare some of these offers. So what that net price really is it's that cost of attendance. So maybe when you Google how much does it cost to attend this school, minus any sort of funds that like gift money that you don't have to pay back. So that would be things like grants, scholarships, maybe a tuition waiver if the student were eligible, and then any sort of other gift aid that they might receive. So it's the cost of attendance minus the free money. Obviously not encompassing of things that will need to be paid back, like student loans, but basically everything else. Another point that I brought up is that the net price is individual to the individual student. So another reason why it's important to really take your time and explore these offers, maybe a student's in a conversation with their best friend or another student that's even sitting next to them in class, being like, oh, well, so-and-so school is really expensive. And then they're just like, oh, well, that school is really expensive. I don't want to go there. Doesn't necessarily apply. A lot of these things are calculated based on what the specific need is for the specific student. So having that conversation and the understanding of the difference in net price and cost of attendance is really important. And so naturally, sticker price, cost of attendance, sometimes used interchangeably, is really important to have an understanding of as well. So again, this is yearly expenses of the school. So this is like all around, all encompassing cost. Not taking aid into account is another piece because the aid is individualized. Another piece that I like to point out here is just, particularly when you're working with students, it's important that they have the understanding of how these pieces are calculated. So this is the most simple way that I like to break it up for people. So how the schools are actually determining the aid that the student receives, they all use this basic formula where it's that cost of attendance, so that sticker price, minus the SAI, so that number calculated by the FAFSA, which determines their need. So again, cost of attendance is an all-encompassing number. This is indirect and direct expenses, so not just tuition fees. It might also be these additional costs as well that are associated with attending school. And then the student aid index, again, is that piece from the FAFSA that tells you, how much need you really have, where your family or in the case of an independent student, the student itself sits financially in terms of how much money they need to fill the gap. And then again, because cost of attendance varies, the need specifically varies depending on school. And then you'll see that then reflected in a financial aid offer. Any questions right now, Nikki, or are we moving along?
None so far, doing great.
Okay, thank you very much. So now that we've talked a little bit about the basic working parts and pieces here, we're going to look at the actual offers themselves. So how do things like net price, cost of attendance, calculation of need, how do they all fall into the piece that we really care about, which is how much money is the student being offered, So we're going to go off a few different examples here. So these are three kind of like rebranded offers that we pretty much typically use at FAME to give an example of things that we'll typically see on financial aid offer letters. So just briefly going over things like the different benefits, drawbacks, different types of information that you might see on different awards, and as well as usually how families go about the process of breaking out and understanding how these different offers work. obviously look at them and talk about maybe some best practices versus some things that maybe a family might just like see off the bat. So things that we want to encourage and discourage people from considering when they're looking at these awards. So this first one here, I like to show this one first because it's honestly my favorite of the three examples. I feel like they do such a great job of breaking out the aid. And I feel like if all aid was broken out similarly to this, we probably wouldn't even need to have this webinar at all. Because it's pretty straightforward, and it's actually pretty honest looking, which is great. So that's just what we want to see. So I've highlighted each piece here based on like color coding, but you'll see in the purple at the very bottom of the award is what you're seeing for cost of attendance and sticker price information. So you'll see one column that's direct cost and one that's indirect costs. When you're looking at those two separately, typically how I explain them is anything that appears on the bill versus things that won't appear on the bill. So indirect costs are things that typically we like students to budget for. There are costs that they're going to incur, but it won't be directly billed for them. So this is things like books and supplies, travel. So maybe they need gas money. And then see on this one in particular, it has things like loan fees. A lot of them don't even include that. So that's pretty nicely done on this award as well. And then we'll look at gift aid. Gift aid is, again, that free money piece, the piece that we want to maximize. And it's all broken out really nicely in one chunk at the top of the award, which is really great. You can see there's a variety of different pieces here, ranging from things like what would be considered like a sports scholarship, so like a Quidditch scholarship, to something like a Pell Grant. So again, these things vary, and it really depends on school to school what they're going to offer. Not in the case of things like federal monies like Pell Grant, or in our instance, the main state grant. But when you're looking at institutional offerings, like maybe it's a sports scholarship or maybe it's something merit-based, have a close look at that as well. I do like to say that cautionarily when you're looking at that proportionally to other schools. I like to show this because this is actually something that I did when I was a senior in high school. Is I remember I got an award from a school that was rather expensive, but they gave me like a $60,000 merit-based scholarship. And I was like, oh, I have to go here. This is like a huge amount of money they're giving me. And it's like, no, well, this is broken up over 4 years and there are these terms to it. And actually the cost of attendance is so large. So having those conversations, I think, is really, really helpful to set like expectations and really understanding the terms of what gift aid is. Obviously, we want to maximize the amount of it, but it's all relative proportionally. So we'll also see things like tuition waivers under that grant aid. So maybe it's the foster tuition waiver program or something of the like. And then you'll see underneath the gift aid section there, we have what's called self-help aid. So those are any of those additional pieces, things that are like work study or even student loans. Talk a little bit more about work study as we move forward, but basically that's the earned paycheck piece. And there on this one in particular, there's federal work study. I do like to point out that even if a student wasn't awarded federal work study, it doesn't mean necessarily they can't have work study. That's something that they should get in touch with someone on campus about specifically because there might be additional jobs that are available. Yeah.
Just wanted to pipe in because I just had a session before this session and someone had asked about work study. And I wanted to mention that, like you said, if you don't see work study on your aid offer, it doesn't mean you don't get it. Because there may be extra funds that weren't used. No one took them up on the work study. But at my school where I worked, we had one pot of funds that was federal work study. So that would go on an aid offer because it's federal money. But we didn't have enough federal work study to hire all of our students to fill the jobs we needed. So we had another pot of money called Job Bank. And so that is what we would hire students that didn't financially qualify for work study. So great point to send them over to the work study office if you want a job, because you never know if you can get it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that, Nikki. Yeah, and I'll say on that as well, actually, when I was in college, I had exhausted all of my work study. I loved working on campus. I mean, who doesn't? It's like a job, but it's not really a job. It's like it's that sweet spot. That's exactly what you want when you're in school. So I had probably a couple of those, and I had exhausted all of my work study funds. And I had went to the financial aid office and I had said to them, I was like, oh, I don't have any more work study money. And they were like, oh yeah, well, we had a couple of kids withdraw, so we still have some money left over, and they just shuffled it over to me. So whether or not you're looking at the certain allocated amount, it might be more than that. It might not show up on your bill. Excuse me, it might not show up on your award, but it does exist altogether. Just always worth having a conversation with the school. And then, yeah, below the work study, you'll also see information about student loans. Another thing I love about this award is that it puts right on there. It says things like earned paycheck, free money, appears on the bill, student loans must be repaid. It's a really, really great way, and it seems very, very clear and direct. So that's something, again, that won't show up on everyone. So something to keep an eye out for, especially if you're advising students. And then you can see that that 5,500 standard federal student loan amount is being offered there, broken up between the subsidized and the unsubsidized loan on this award. And it is also broken up by fall, spring, and total, which is nice that it does that as well. Other thing I point out about this one in particular is they do a great job explaining the assumptions that the award's based on. It breaks out and reiterates things like your student aid index, your grade level, your residency. So if any of these things aren't correctly displayed, it would be easy for you to identify and then go inform the school that they're incorrect. So definitely something that you would want to double check when you get this offer in. And then they just do a quick calculation breakout there on the side as well, looking at the estimated bill. They look at they look at it for the year, which is nice because, that's usually what I would suggest people do is they look at it for the whole year. Because just because you can pay through the fall semester doesn't mean you want to have a long-term plan about how you're going to be able to afford your education. So looking at that and then even considering it for years to come, particularly when you're looking at even things like gift aid or any of these scholarships renewable, are there certain terms that you have to meet to make sure that you're continuing to get them? So all things to consider there. All right. And then, yeah, so these are just understanding the parts. So again, this one looks a little bit different than the last one does. For how they break out the cost of attendance into direct and indirect costs, you can see in the orange box at the top there. So see, they don't have the labels. It's not as nicely labeled, so people might not necessarily know what will show up on their bill. Maybe. Because if somebody doesn't go, oh, I know direct cost or tuition and fees, and these are the things that are billed to me. However, possible additional expenses, it's like, what does that mean? Is that in the cost of attendance? What's the difference between that and the net price? So it's just all of these different working parts and pieces, and we don't want people to feel like they need to speak a second language to understand any of this. But, here we are. So this is just it's a pretty decent breakout. I mean, it at least tells you what the tuition fees, and then this should say, instead of room and board, it should say housing and food that's been changed. But this is typically what you would see on an offer letter. And then it gives you the anticipated direct cost. And this also has assumptions on it. It really only has the two. It has the campus housing situation, and then if the student is attending full-time or part-time. This is another one of those situations where you'd still want to make sure that they have the correct information on file for you. So like you're starting as a freshman, again, things like commuting, those all make a difference in terms of the aid that you might be awarded. And you can see here, I like to point this out in particular because they kind of just bunch all of their aid together. It's just kind of like in one block. So that can obviously be confusing for a student, especially the work study. I like to point this out because people generally do not seem to know, and no fault of their own, because it's kind of just put right in there, that work study isn't applied to the bill. It's that earned paycheck. So you will earn it throughout the semester, but you really shouldn't be anticipating applying it to the bill that you have. In an ideal world, we would love to tell students to, if they can, save that money and apply it to next semester. But, obviously we understand if that's not a possibility either. And, it's tough. Like maybe they want to use it for laundry. Maybe they do want to include it in the cost for those indirect expenses. We just want to make sure that they understand it's not being applied to the bill, because when they go and they look at that total financial aid award line, it is basically saying it is. They're looking at how much they need to fill that gap they need to include an additional $1,250 in that because work study will not be applied. So again, just something to consider. But you can also see that they clump things like the loans in with the grants. So just teasing those things out, if they're not clearly divided, is really important just to make sure that the student understands how much they're going to be paying. And then the last piece of information that I really wanted to call out on this in particular was how do you accept the aid? So this is conveyed in a lot of different ways in a lot of different offers. You know, sometimes it might be on the offer letter, sometimes it's not on the offer letter, sometimes it's in the portal or the email. So a lot of different places that you'll want to go check and make sure that you have access to. But in the instance of this, they were kind and they put it right on the reverse side, just giving instructions about how basically the student needs to move forward. Again, not in all instances does the student actually have to do anything additional to accept the aid after they've accepted admission, but a lot of the times they do. All right. And then this is the third example we have here. So a lot of information on this award, just a lot going on. But honestly, not too bad. Still pretty good. You know, I think that with knowledge is power. So I would rather have an offer that has kind of a lot of stuff on it, but gives you the ability to tease it out than one that just kind of just is like, okay, here's some of the information and off you go. So it's, you know, it's a pretty decent offer. Um, so this one obviously is also broken out fall, spring total in terms of when you're receiving what aid. But it has one hallmarking piece that the other offers didn't. It actually provides information on other funding options, which is pretty nice. Um, so they mentioned something like a payment plan or a tuition payment plan, which is a big piece that I find that a lot of families don't know about. And they're a really, really good option for some families who do have the ability to pay some amount out of pocket. They don't have, other than like the initial fee to set up the payment plan, they're interest free, which is really nice. And next month, when we have a webinar about paying the bill, Jess will talk a little bit more about that, which will be great. But definitely something that I like to let families know is an option a lot of the time. They also call out things like military benefit, and then the option for private student loans as well. So they mentioned that there on the side. And then you can see at the bottom in the green here, they have other general notices about the award. So they give information in one part of this specifically about a scholarship that was awarded above, which is really nice. It's really great that they included that there. A lot of the times you'd have to do extra due diligence to find out any additional information about scholarships. So I would say if a student receives an award like this, not the standard, that information is going to be included. But again, it is really nice that it's there. They even include information about the work study portion that we were just talking about. That just because it's not on there, it doesn't mean you're not getting it. And then, you know, a place to go to be able to, you know, contact them any questions you have, which is really great. So pretty decent offer. Alrighty. So, now that we've looked at those, we're going to do like what the actual meat of this webinar is supposed to be, which is comparing the offers to each other. So what I'm going to do, is I'm actually going to use the worksheet that we provide at FAME, to compare these two offers, just pretty quick. So what I'd done is I took the first and the second offer and I chopped out the aid piece so I could fit them on the same screen, so that we could have a look at them together. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up that sheet.
While you do that, I'm gonna put in the chat where folks can download the comparison worksheet
Thank you,
folks
Nikki.
to use, or, oh, and look, there's Olive, beautiful. Also, what you're gonna be using is the online version, which will do the math for you, which is helpful to me. I know I work with the money, but I love it when something does the math. I'll put that in the chat as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nikki. That's super helpful. And yeah, so for anybody who might be retrieving the recording after this, it is included in the slides as well. We'll put a little bit of information about that. about where to retrieve that. But Nikki,
Michelle,
did you have
can
something?
you make that, sorry, that left side a little bit larger? There's a little slide bar on the bottom that you could zoom in just.
Yeah. Oh, perfect. Thank
The
you.
blind girl in the audience. That's
No, I get it. We were all there, honestly. It was probably too small for the average individual. I'm gonna make it a little bit bigger, actually,
okay, great.
if it'll let me. I don't know what's going on today. Okay, wonderful. So, let's have a look at these two offers here.
Perfect.
So, you can see that it's really great. Like as Nikki was explaining, this is the dynamic worksheet we have right on our website. And the reason why that's so wonderful is because it takes the math out of it. Like I'm not gonna pull up a calculator. I'm not gonna do any of that jazz. Because having all these numbers in front of you is like enough for it to be a little bit stressful, and we don't want to discourage anybody in this process from wanting to do it at all. So it's great that we have this tool. I find myself using it all the time, especially when I meet with students and their families. And once you fill this out, the other thing that's great is that you can actually download it as the PDF. So if you want to like print or save a copy of it after you've entered all the school information in there, that is totally, totally possible. So you can go ahead and enter the school name up here. So in this instance, I'll just do 1 and then school 2, but in whatever other instance, you can enter whatever name you like. So we have tuition and mandatory fees, is the first line item here. And what I did is just to make it easier for the sake of the webinar, I broke them out by color. So you can see that the tuition and fees is actually broken up on this first piece here. So you have that 43,740 as well as the $700. And I do actually need to pull up my calculator for that, I think, because I am not going to try to do that on the top of my head and get it wrong because that would be embarrassing.
I'll do it. Why don't you do the first
The
school?
room. Sure.
On school too.
Okay, thanks, Nikki. So in the instance of this one, they do not have it broken out for school 1. So you can see that the tuition fees are $11,747. So I can just type that in there. And you can see that it auto-populated right there, which is wonderful. Nikki, did you have that for school 2?
School 2's tuition and fees added together is 44,440. 4440.
Geez, that one, it really did it. Wow, so you can see quite a bit of difference there. So these are two good offers to have a look at side by side. So great, so you can see that that populated as well. And then after that, we can go and then retrieve the numbers for room and board. So for school 1, that's in yellow, it's 11,255. And so what that'll do is you can see right here in the direct cost line, which is denoted by the billed by school line, it'll tell you exactly what you're looking at. So that is $23,002. So really, really great because you can have a look at that and then you can see before we even enter the room and board on the other one, what we're looking at for price wise. So it's just a really good practice. I think this is a really, really great tool to share with families because they get to see it progress and see how it changes. So for that school, it is 13,936 for a total of 58 and change. Now we'll look at the part that's really interesting to us, which is the grants and scholarships. So I highlighted all of those in blue, which again, when we're looking at this first offer here, they do a really, really great job of just culminating it all together. They put all of the like money in one area. So, I mean, not only does that make it easier for the student to understand, but it also makes it easier for me to input in the sheet right now, which I appreciate. So you can just type that number in there, which is $11,745. You can see that number is located right here because we are going by total for the year rather than each term. But you can see how that basically it adds up to that. For the second school, I actually did do this one ahead of time because I know what a pain this one in particularly is. So if you add up everything in blue on this screen, it's $37,345. So that's what you're looking at there. So interesting spot to be because we looked at the direct cost and we saw that large differential between the two. However, again, you're looking back at the net cost before loans after the aid And then you see that that number has decreased. So the amount of difference is smaller there because more grants and scholarships on one end than the other. However, not necessarily enough to offset that price. So where it may look really great on paper that you're getting a lot of money, it only matters in relativity to how much the school is going to cost. And then we will look at, I don't think we're gonna, are there loans on here? Yeah, I guess we could do a loan piece too. So if we're looking at the loans, it's 5,500. Theoretically, they should probably get the same amount on each. Nikki, isn't that right? Like, wouldn't they get like the same amount from each school?
Usually, so if you can see on the left-hand side, it says direct subsidized and unsubsidized, so it's actually one loan. It's just that a portion of it is subsidized by the government. You're not paying interest on it while you're in school. At another school, you might not have as much need, so they could possibly take that same loan amount, the total amount, the 5,500, and they might shift some of that subsidized into unsubsidized. So it could be like it's the same overall amount. It's just that you might have different numbers and subsidized and unsubsidized. So just to see for this example, the maximum subsidized a freshman can get is 3,500. So unsubsidized would be 2,000, but for someone who has no financial need, they can still get this loan. It just would be all an unsubsidized loan.
Okay, great. Thanks for explaining that, Nikki. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have that, and then we have that. So we are looking at this total cost here. So this is what it would be for the balance due. So again, this is for anything that's actually billable. We'll go ahead and add information on the indirect costs, but remember that for indirect costs, this is all an estimate. We don't really know how much it's going to actually be. And then this is also handled a little bit differently because it is not billed by the school. This is something that, you know, individuals can have a little bit more discretion about. And for one example, one student might have a car on campus, one student might not have a car on campus. That can skew the cost, the indirect cost pretty significantly. You know, especially if one student's commuting, one student is not. So, you know, things like that factor into play. But for the sake of this, oh my goodness, I didn't add these up ahead of time. So this one for school one would be 3,270. And for this school, it would be, Nikki, can you help me?
That the indirect cost is 2,600.
Thank you. Okay. So that's their estimate that they put for indirect costs. So if we're looking for an estimated total cost, you can see for that first school, it's about 9,000 and change. And for the second school, it's about 18,000 and change. You can input the work study here, but again, remember that's something that's not going to be, you know, directly billed. That's usually an earned paycheck that maybe they want to apply at a later date or use for, you know, just things that they need to complete, you know, their education. So pretty significant, about half the price for 1 year for school one versus school two. Not necessarily surprising when you're looking at the actual cost of them initially on the bill, but again, it totally depends on student need, what they have maybe even for institutional aid, all these other working pieces. So it's very much worth going through this exercise when you're comparing award offers. Any questions right now before we move on from this piece?
Nope, no questions in the chat.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, let's see. Okay, wonderful. So yeah, I did include this in the slide as well, just to remind everybody that it's there. Again, this is available on our website. Nikki dropped a link in the chat, which is wonderful. It's our comparing awards online PDF. So that's available right on our website. It's actually a 2-page document. There's also a really nifty tool after that that helps you include information about paying the bill. So not sure if that's something that Jess will talk about next time, but either way, you can also access that right on the sheet. All right, so I will briefly talk about paying the balance. Again, I'm not going to go into great detail on this because I don't want to give any spoilers away. But I'll talk about the ones that we really want to make sure we get information out on in case you can't attend next time. So one of the big ones there is the Worthington Scholarship. Probably something that you've heard of. It's all the buzz because it's such an awesome opportunity. And we really, really, if a student can qualify for this, we really want to see that they apply. Mostly because of that last bullet right there. In 2024, over 80% of applicants received a scholarship. That is just an astounding number. And I think about it and, I went to USM, and if this had been available in my time, I wouldn't have any college debt. So, it's such an awesome thing. I really want to make sure students get access to that. So, a couple of just quick pieces, importance of, student attending a partner high school, as well as partner colleges. So partner colleges are listed on the right-hand side there. And all this information is also available on their website, which is right at the top there, worthingtonscholars.org. And just some information about their eligibility, SAI requirements, GPA, depending on what type of college they're planning on attending. But again, just really would love to see people apply. It's worth up to $20,000. It's renewable over 4 years, so $5,000 a year. Another resource regarding scholarships that we like to share is Maine Community Foundation. I don't have enough good things to say about their scholarship resources. I think that they're really wonderful. I feel like anytime I'm ever talking to anybody, whether it's in a professional or personal capacity when they're looking into college, is that they go and have a peek at these scholarships, because I haven't met a single person that there isn't at least one on here that they can apply to, which is really wonderful. So they have a number of different ways you can search on this website, ranging from specific scholarships for adult learners, or so like non-traditional students, as well as even scholarships for those who are looking at graduate education, or even some of those more niche categories that are typically a little bit harder to find scholarships for. So maybe those students who go to private high school. You can also look by region, a number of different ways. They also have this really great tool where if you go on and make an account, you just answer some questions about yourself, and it'll basically pinpoint the scholarships that might apply to you, which is really great. So it takes some of that guesswork out of it. Again, we love to have people look at that. It's a really great resource. And then, of course, it would just be a shame not to mention our own scholarship search, like we have to do it. So this is obviously another great tool where we house Maine-specific scholarships. And another reason why we really like to promote these 3 pieces, we do the Worthington, then we talk about Maine Community Foundation, and then we talk about our website, is because these are scholarships that are available to Maine students. And the reason why that's important is because there's just a higher rate of awardal. They're not competing on that national level for some of these scholarship funds, which is really great. So you can filter our website in a number of different ways, looking, high school, college student, adult learner, what major are they? So a number of different ways that you can go about looking through this. We also like to point out this one particular scholarship as an example. The Maine Legislative Scholarship historically has gone unawarded in some pieces. There are 16 scholarships, one for each county. And honestly, in the past, there have been like a handful that have been claimed each year, like 5, 6, if that's correct. I don't know, Nikki, is that about right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
sadly, we have 16 to give out.
Right.
5 and 6 people applying each year. We had to extend 2 years in a row to get enough people to give the money to. All right, that's it. I'm gonna pipe down now.
No, absolutely. That's a great soapbox to be on, honestly, because there's money out there just trying to give it away to people. So we just want to make sure we're seeing as many people apply to these opportunities as possible. Again, when the awardal chance is so much higher. So yeah, please have a check at some of those. And then we like to point out some other reputable sites if you're going to look for scholarship. This is an example of MMA, Maine Municipal Association's website. So maybe looking for reputable organizations that fit a specific area of study. So in this instance, it's like if you're interested in going to public service, so maybe like a job in the government, maybe you want to go work for a municipality. This would be a great opportunity, would be applying for this scholarship in particular, or even trying like Googling the type of major that you're interested in and then just taking a scholarship after it. something as simple as that. We love to have people have a look and, try to bridge that gap. And then brings us to the conversation if all of these different pieces are not enough. When you're looking at comparing the offers in particular, I always encourage people to not just look at that 1 year, which is, typically the way that it's designed to have you look. You want to look at that first year, see how you're going to be able to finance that. Is it affordable? But you really want to also look about if it's sustainable. So what's your plan? Are you going to be using a bunch of savings in your first year? Is that going to leave you to need like a lot of loans in your subsequent years? Do you have a large amount of scholarships that are non-renewable? Is there an opportunity to renew these scholarships? These are just different questions that you would want to have. And just things to consider when you're comparing the entire cost of education just to the first year that the student is attending. So another thing we like to point out is, the role of free community college. So different schools with different, even that like a transfer agreement or something like that, to be able to make it, more affordable, especially where we're looking at now, this potentially continued access to this free community college. So having a plan, even if it is to transfer out, to finish the degree, those 2 free years of college are huge in terms of minimizing, particularly debt. So definitely something we like to encourage students to at least explore and have a look at, see how much that would save them, because sometimes that can really be the thing that pushes the scales. Again, I've mentioned it a couple of times, but next month is when we're really digging into these different pieces about paying the bill. So Jess will be here to talk about the path to paying the bill and tips to affording college and financial aid. So again, after you got through the process of comparing these and you know how much that gap's going to be, what are you going to do? How are you going to fill it? What pieces and tools do we have? Another piece that I like to mention is having that loan conversation. And when you're having that, when you're in there and looking at the different financial aid offers, this is a good time to start that loan conversation with students. Just kind of explaining, the difference there, and having a look at, federal versus private loans, maybe what the terms are, conversations about credit and repayment. And then different things like interest rates and when you're looking at like federal programs versus private programs like loan forgiveness. So these are all different working parts and pieces, but we just really want to make sure that students understand the terms of any sort of aid that they're accepting before they accept it. So just because loans are on the offer doesn't necessarily mean that's the best option for the student. So they might not want to include that when they're looking at it. That's why we have it broken out separately in our comparing offers worksheet. So just another piece of the puzzle that you want to have a conversation with about that. But we do have a lot of helpful tools on our website itself. You can see that right on borrowing student loans on Fame's website. This gives a lot of information, everything from, talking about the difference between federal and private loans, how to minimize the amount that you're borrowing, all these different parts and pieces, which are really great. And then, when you're looking at loans, the biggest thing that you're really going to want to talk about is understanding payback. Again, I'm sure that Jess will talk about this next week, but understanding interest rates, repayment periods, are huge. And then really getting an idea of if that is something that is manageable based on what type of salary the student is going to be making after college. So have an idea about that. Have an idea about what might be a threshold that's a comfortable amount to borrow, rather than almost trying to make the shoe fit. Just because a student really, really likes the idea of a college doesn't mean necessarily that might be the perfect path for them, particularly in their point of success. Okay. That is everything I had. I know we're wrapped a little bit early, but I would love to take any questions that anybody had, or if Nikki, if there's anything that you would like to add to the presentation, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, I think that was really great. And I love doing these aid offers. I'd also love to know in the chat if folks have gotten any aid offers. I haven't seen a lot, so wondering if anyone is starting to see them. If so, which schools are you seeing them from? But I think a lot of students are just so excited when they get that acceptance. And I always say, like, let's pump the brakes and show me the money. Like, let's do this activity first and see if this school is affordable. Because you might be able to sell a kidney and pay for year one, but you still got 2, 3, and 4 left, and you need 2 kidneys, guys. So, it's just important to look at the money first and make that plan for the whole 4 years. And if you only applied to one school, it's too expensive, like, we can regroup, like, we can go after other schools. It's just really important that folks know about the financial piece of it. I'm not seeing any questions in the chat or the Q&A, so I feel like folks are good.
Well, great. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for joining today. And if you have any questions or anything following up, please feel free to get in touch. I believe we send out a slide deck in the recording after this presentation. So have a look for that. And if you need anything else, we'll be around.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.